Hey guys, Michael here from Sherlock.com. In this video, I want to talk about Apple's projected 2012 lineup. When they announced the iPad 3rd generation, the quote that ended it all was, "This is just the beginning. Expect more of this innovation throughout the year." I think 2012 is going to be a huge year for Apple. In 2011, we saw a very similar iPad release. We saw a very similar iPhone release. We didn't really see any innovation in terms of their iMac or MacBook lines. I think 2012 is the year we see a significant overhaul and improvement of Apple's lineup. So, it's already the beginning of April, so we'll start about there. At the end of this month and in May, around that time frame, I think we're going to see updated MacBooks. I'm pretty sure we're going to see updated MacBooks, actually. The biggest rumor and suggestion is that it's going to be redesigned with a slimmer body for the 15-inch MacBook Pro, with a 17-inch redesign coming a little bit later. In terms of specs, we're thinking quad-core Ivy Bridge CPUs, which are more efficient, faster, and of course have less heat output than previous iterations of Intel CPUs. Improved battery life. We saw some pretty big innovation in terms of the battery space when Apple, released the 3rd generation iPad, and I think that technology and that innovation will transfer over to the MacBook line. And it's 2012. I also think that the remaining USB ports will be bumped up to 3.0. Now, within the next 2 years, I think all Apple displays are going to feature retina technology, that high pixel density. In fact, in Lion and Mountain Lion, we have an HIDPI mode, which essentially, as you increase the resolution, I'm sure you've noticed on screens, on monitors in the past, everything gets smaller. The idea with HIDPI is you take double the resolution graphics, but you keep it at sort of the same size, so everything isn't minute, yet everything looks crisp. And we have that feature in Lion. It's kind of hidden because there's no real displays that can take advantage of that retina type display. But I think along the time, we're going to start seeing some retina options, and it's going to take advantage of that. And I think this is how they're going to sort of separate their lines. I still think there's going to be a MacBook Pro and a MacBook Air line. I think the MacBook Pro is what we're going to see with the Retina displays, and 13, 15, and 17 inches. The MacBook Air, I think, will have an 11, 13, and 15-inch options. Those are going to be lower cost, not as powerful. They're still going to be, significantly strong, but they're not going to have quite the specs as the MacBook Pro, and of course they won't have the Retina displays. I think that's kind of the short-term vision for the portable lineup. I think the designs are going to be very similar. They're going to be small. The MacBook Pro design may not be quite as thin, but it will be significantly smaller than the current unibody design. Now for late May and June, I think we're going to see an updated iMac, a thinner case, there's not much you can do to redesign it at this point, but to make it a little bit thinner and to make it look really just like a monitor as opposed to a computer or an all-in-one as it is now. Obviously that Ivy Bridge quad-core CPU with an updated graphics as well. Again, USB 3.0 updates because it is 2012. This isn't a beta spec. This is the spec for the future for USB, which is widely used by consumers. So come on, Apple, get your head in the game there. And I think one thing that's interesting, Apple has been very hesitant to adopt matte screens. With the MacBook Pro, that was always a made-to-order option. You had to pay extra for that. It wasn't even available in the iMac. I think the iMac, is becoming, a very big product for them. It encompasses so many features, and a lot of media is being consumed on them. And I think the fact that everything's so glossy is an issue. So I think that a matte screen option, or matte screen by default, is something we're going to start seeing with the iMac starting in late May in the June timeframe. Speaking of the June timeframe, that's when we can expect WWDC. So we're going to see more about Lion, some more features, and then they're going to announce the release date, and the pricing is probably going to be the same as Lion. But I think the real interesting things coming with the Mac Pro. This could go one of two ways. I think we're going to see finally a spec bump after a long wait with, new Ivy Bridge, quad-core, and Xenon processors, blah, blah, blah. There's also speculation that they're going to go ahead and kill the Mac Pro. I don't really think so. I think there's still a Pro market. They've changed a lot of their Pro level software, particularly Final Cut, but I think the Mac Pro is still, something that should be kept in there for, Hollywood, for instance. They use Mac Pros, almost industry standard. So that's just something to keep in mind. I also think that we're going to see iOS 6, and by think, I mean I'm 99.99% sure that's what they've been doing, showing the new versions of iOS at WWDC, because that's where all the developers are. So in terms of iOS 6, I think we're sort of getting to the point where the processors are so strong, the battery life is coming along nicely. I think we're going to finally see some true multitasking. I also think we're going to see built-in turn-by-turn directions with voice. We see that, on the Windows Phone platform, and Android has some options as well. But it makes sense to me that they're finally going to start improving maps. Slowly but surely they've been improving that. It makes sense to start integrating some turn-by-turn directions with voice built in. I also think we're going to see improved Siri. I have a video on how they can improve Siri, so I'm not going to jump into all those features now, but I think we're going to see version 2 of Siri, and that's going to obviously be available for the iPhone 4S and future incarnations of the iPhone. I also think a feature that we're going to have to start seeing is, particularly because Windows 8 tablets can do this, and it actually works very well with Metro, is 2 apps open at the same time on the iPad. It makes perfect sense, especially if you're trying to use this as a laptop replacement, to be able to have one app for the web browser so you can read a spec sheet, and the other app open for maybe, the mobile version of your website, or for your WordPress installation, or of a text editor. It makes perfect sense for that to be implemented. And I think that's just something that we're going to finally see, and it's definitely going to be a strong overhaul of iOS, being able to have true multitasking and 2 apps open at the same time. In addition, I think we're going to see the redesigned notification center. They finally slapped that on with the last incarnation. Particularly on the iPad, it looks horrible. It's just a terrible looking implementation. On the iPhone, it's a little bit better, but still looks a little funky. So they're going to definitely make that better. And I think they're going to make the home screen smarter as well. Right now, we see only pages and pages of apps. Metro UI on Windows Phone 7 offers a much different appeal, and it works very nicely. I'm starting to really get the hang of Windows Phone, and I'm starting to really like it. So I think Apple, it's time. This is your 6th version of this software. I think it's time to spruce it up, and this was released in 2007, and cosmetically it really hasn't changed, and it's 2012 now. I think that's not really Apple's MO, and I think they're going to address that at WWDC. But we won't be seeing new iPhone hardware at WWDC. That's going to be announced in September, the September-October range, the 6th generation iPhone, which will not be called the iPhone 5. It'll be called the new iPhone, similar to the iPad 3 is called the new iPad. Particularly, iPhone 5 didn't make sense because it was actually the 6th generation of iPhone. So that's just confusing. Not only is the numbering just ridiculous and gets cumbersome and annoying, but the iPhone 5 is the 6th generation. It doesn't really make sense. So the new iPhone is going to have a new form factor with a unibody design. It's going to look revolutionary, and it's going to be, I think, the biggest change we've seen thus far for iPhone updates. I think it's going to have better battery life. Again, Apple has really been innovating with that, particularly in the iPad market, and I think we're going to see that improved battery life, that improved battery life transition over to the iPhone line. Why is that? Because we're going to have 4G LTE for AT&T, Sprint, and international carriers, AT&T, Verizon Wireless, and Sprint, I should say, for international carriers, and that takes up a lot of battery life, as well as, an improved processor, more RAM, a la 3rd generation iPad. There's some rumors that the A5X will be coming to the 6th gen iPhone. That doesn't really make sense to me because really the only difference between the A5 and the A5X is improved graphics performance to support retina on the iPad, so that doesn't really make sense, but there will be some sort of improvements in terms of processor and graphics performance and more RAM. But I also think after 5 generations of hardware, I think the screen size is going to change. I think we're finally going to see that 4-inch Retina display. Right now I'm using the Lumia 900 as my daily driver. That may be a little too big at 4.3 inches because there are some things you can't use your thumb for. You just can't reach on that screen size. But I think 3.5 inches is really sort of on the small end at this point for smartphones. And I think, another ½ inch gives you a size that's still very pocketable, still very portable, still one-hand usable, but it also gives you some extra space for apps and consuming content, which I think is something that's pretty important. Although the screen size change, I think, is the biggest question mark on this entire list. But I really, I'm feeling that update is probably going to be necessary, especially because how revolutionary this new 6th gen iPhone is going to be. I think in terms of the iPod line, around this time, I think we're going to see a refreshed iPod Touch. So the latest specs, more RAM, updated camera, A5 chip, all that jazz. Nothing really too revolutionary there. Probably going to be a very similar form factor to what it is now. And again, with the iPod Nano and Shuffle, I think it's going to be very similar, if not the same at this point. Now, I know y'all have been waiting for this one, the Apple TV, the Apple television set, I should say. I think that this is going to be coming out in Q4 of this year. Some people have been saying, you know, first half 2013. I'm thinking Q4 2012, actually. I think what we're going to see is, obviously, the picture quality is going to be great, and it's definitely going to be an internet-connected television. It's going to have Siri controls as well as a touchscreen remote, and I'm sure it'll tie in beautifully with iPhone, iPad, iPod Touch, and your Mac. I think it's all going to start working together, and the fact that, you know, the content that you consume on your iPhone is synchronized and exactly the same as your new Mac with Mountain Lion, as is the same on your Apple television, as is the same on your third device, that iPad. I think it's all connected. I also think that we're going to finally see it. You know, I previously, when we talked about the last Apple TV refresh, I talked about this, and I think we're going to see it when it finally switches over to the TV set, you know, a full version of iOS running on there, so you can get apps, games on the big screen, third-party developers, which really took the iPhone platform by storm and made it what it is today. On the TV, I think we can see some really, really evolutionary things going on there. And of course, you know, the real killer feature is if you can integrate live TV, DVR, and internet television streams all into one form. So it's easy to use. So I don't have to worry about how it's happening, but when I want to watch my Yankees, I say play Yankees. And whether that has to pull it from MLB.TV, pull the HD stream from the antenna, you know, pull YouTube clips even if there's nothing being played at that time, it needs to pull something up for me, and I don't want to have to think about where the source is coming from. If they can do that, this will be an interesting option. So this has been kind of a long video, but there's my projections for Apple's 2012 lineup. Again, I think this is going to be a revolutionary year for Apple. I think they really, you know, they're growing at a huge rate now, but I think they have a really strong pipeline for 2012. So I'm Michael Sherlock from michaelsherlock.com. What do you think about this lineup? And if you have any things that I missed or something that you think is wrong, please leave some comments in the comments section below. I'd love to read them. Thanks for watching, guys, and have an excellent day.